one of the largest, most significant investments in climate change the country's ever seen. Obviously one of the largest investments in the American economy in a very, very long time. It is identified and targeting tax credits for consumers and businesses that save money on energy bills, creates jobs, makes homes and buildings more efficient, utilizes clean energy sources, and lowers greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change and global warming. We are here today to talk about direct pay. I know that's what people are interested in. The direct pay, creates a funding environment for taxes and entities like us, the local government, school districts, nonprofits, faith-based organizations, etc. Considering novel and clean energy projects, so these organizations that are working on clean energy projects like solar, geothermal, heat pumps, hydro, and organizations pursuing these projects, having completed them, can apply to the IRS and receive the value of the tax credit associated with the investment in the form of a direct check from the U.S. Treasury. That payment could be between 30 to 50% of the value of the energy project, which is incredible. We are all excited about that. One, it incentivizes us to work on clean energy projects. It is incredible because the federal government gives direct money to entities that are doing this work. We saw with ARPA how well that worked in municipalities around the country, how direct payment to cities got that money spent and created incredible projects across the country. I'm excited about what we want to do in Newark and about what all the partner organizations are going to do at the same time. I want to thank the United States Treasury and also thank the Biden-Harris administration for putting this together. This is incredible, and once again, they've done right by the people of this country, so thank you. I don't know if I have to bring somebody else up. Okay.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Preeti Thungaraj. I'm from the Governor's Office of Climate Action and the Green Economy. Thank you, Mayor, for welcoming us to Newark. As the Mayor mentioned, it's a pretty remarkable time to be investing in clean energy. The Inflation Reduction Act was signed a few years ago. It's the biggest piece of climate legislation since the Clean Air Act. And there's an unprecedented $330 billion in clean energy incentives available to communities, residents, state, local governments, faith institutions, etc. One of the newest and most unique provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act is direct pay. So we're going to hear a lot more from our experts on what direct pay is and how nonprofits, local governments, and other folks can really leverage that money. I'm going to click through here. I'm going to kick off by saying anything in this presentation is not tax advice. There's a couple of resources that the Governor's Office and the state is able to provide on direct pay. So I do want to reference this tool that we're coming out with, which is essentially a calculator that'll help you understand how much you can recover on your clean energy projects, whether it's solar on schools or solar on churches or new electric vehicles in your fleet. So some pretty exciting stuff, and you'll be able to see an actual quote for the amount you'll recover from that. So that's pending publication, but we will make sure to share the link with everyone. I also wanted to offer my contact information. I will be your point of contact from the state on direct pay. I will bridge you to resources that you need or any answers you need or any questions you need answered. One of those resources is the remarkable experts from the Biden-Harris administration, from the U.S. Department of Treasury and the U.S. Department of Energy. So without further ado, I want to welcome David Eichenthal from the U.S. Department of Treasury to talk about direct pay.
Thanks, everyone. Preeti, thanks for that nice introduction. Mayor, thank you so much for welcoming us to Newark. I'm going to start my presentation, and how bad will it be if I move from the podium? Does that really mess up the recording?
Should be
Okay. So I'm going to just in the interest of actually being able to see, there we go. So I'll start by saying, repeating the disclaimer that Preeti offered for the state. I'll make the same disclaimer for the Treasury Department. This is not tax advice. This is not tax guidance. This is really designed to provide an overview of the 60 different pieces of guidance that Treasury and the IRS have put out there around the Inflation Reduction Act. It's good news that this isn't tax advice. I'm not a tax lawyer. I'm not an accountant. My background is actually in local government. I was a city finance officer for many years and worked with cities around the country. And Mayor, to your point, this really is, I think, what has come to be part of this notion of problem-solving federalism, right? Where the federal government provides resources, provides a fair amount of discretion to local governments, and I think I've heard lots of mayors say local governments get stuff done, and this is really a mechanism for doing that. So I think, as Preeti said, this is the largest investment in clean energy in U.S. history. I've heard some people. I was on a webinar with Senator Markey from Massachusetts last week, where he said it's the largest investment in clean energy anywhere ever. It's probably right as well. And the reason that I'm here, right, the reason that I'm here from the Treasury Department to talk to you about this is because the bulk of that investment is really coming through the tax code, right? So there are absolutely grant programs that have been funded through the Inflation Reduction Act. Hopefully, I know the state has, hopefully the city of Newark has, other local government entities, other nonprofits. But most of these dollars are really coming through the tax code. And the Inflation Reduction Act has about 20 different tax provisions in it that are designed to incentivize this transition to clean energy for the private sector, for individual households, as the mayor talked about, individual consumers. And the really good news is it's working, right? So that we know that there's been hundreds of billions of dollars of announced investments in clean energy manufacturing, incentivized in part by the Inflation Reduction Act. We know that for individual households that may be putting solar on their roof, or consumers who may be buying an electric vehicle, it's going to cut costs for them on an ongoing basis. We know that it's having an impact gradually to reduce pollution in some of our communities, and it is essential to meet the goals around the clean energy transition and the goals around emissions that have been stated. What direct pay really does, by the way, it's sometimes called direct pay, sometimes called elective pay. You know, we like to say we named it twice because it's so nice. But it's basically the same thing. What direct pay, what elective pay does is it doesn't level a playing field. It basically widens a playing field, right? So that to the extent that we have these objectives around the clean energy transition that have to be met, we need to make sure that we're incentivizing the private sector. We need to make sure that we're incentivizing individual households, individual consumers. But local government entities, nonprofit entities, school districts, they are all significant users of energy as well. And direct pay, elective pay is really designed to provide them with a set of financial incentives to advance this transition too. So the way it works is actually pretty straightforward. For about a dozen of those tax provisions, a dozen of those tax credits under the Inflation Reduction Act, direct pay applies. That means if you're the city of Newark, if you're a school district, if you're any one of many different types of applicable entities, talk about what that means in a moment, you can act as if you were a private sector taxpayer and claim the financial value of the credit that would come for you for investments. Now, again, I know, I used to be a city finance officer. Somebody came and said to me, hey, have I got a tax credit program for you? I'd kind of look at them a little bit weird and go, I don't pay taxes, so why are you coming to me? That's the whole point of direct pay or elective pay, right? It is a provision in the law that allows non-tax paying entities to take advantage of, to benefit from this tax credit, these series of tax credits. And these are tax credits, right? So frequently when I give these talks, somebody will come up to me and say, can you tell me where the notice of funding opportunity is for this? And how do I go through when's the proposal due? What's the deadline for this? This isn't a competitive grant program, right? These are tax credits, largely uncapped, not subject to competition. So I have a friend who likes to say, if you earn the credit, you get it, right? It's as straightforward as all of that. So how does this work? I'd like y'all to think about 3 different sort of questions as you approach direct pay and how it may work for your government entity, your nonprofit entity, right? First question is, am I an applicable entity under direct pay for the tax code? Second question is, am I engaged in a project or activity, or am I buying things that might meet some of the underlying requirements of the tax credits where direct pay applies? And then the third thing is, as you're thinking about the value, how much money do I get back from the federal government? It's a question around whether you're doing anything that would trigger one of a series of different bonus provisions under direct pay. But we'll start with applicable entities, right? Local governments, state governments, agencies or instrumentalities of state or local government, right? All meet the criteria for applicable entities under direct pay. You can see the full list here. It includes rural electric cooperatives, it includes tribal organizations, but really importantly, and it's where local governments, city governments can play such a great role, it includes any nonprofit entity organized in sections 501 to 530 of the tax code, right? So I had a mayor, I did this talk for a bunch of mayors in the Atlanta region. And the mayor of Decatur, Georgia came up to me afterwards and said, I had no idea. I had no idea that the city could do this, but I knew about this because I know my church is putting solar on it, and I know that we're getting direct pay for that. So this is a great opportunity for cities to do what the mayor and the city of Newark has done so well today, convene different people, because there are so many different organizations in every community that are going to be able to benefit from this. Remember, is my organization an applicable entity? Do I meet one of those different criteria? Second question is, am I doing something? Am I engaged in a project? Am I buying something that fits with some of the underlying requirements of any one of the 12 tax credits where direct pay applies, right? And the short answer is, in my experience in working with local governments, with nonprofit entities, they tend to have buildings that you need to power or cool or heat, and they tend to have vehicles. And I think if you've got a vehicle or a building, there's something in direct pay for you. If you're at a point where your organization has a sustainability plan, or the city has a climate action plan, then there are a lot of things in direct pay for you. These 12 credits really fall into 4 different categories, right? So one category has to do with the production of clean fuel. So you'll see on the next slide when I show it that there's a credit related to production of clean hydrogen, for example. There are a couple of credits related to manufacturing. That usually doesn't apply as much to local governments and nonprofits. That's more something for the private sector, but you could think about situations or scenarios where a local government or a nonprofit that may own an industrial park, for example, might want to think about whether there's an opportunity there. The 2 big general areas where direct pay is proving to be most useful, where there's the greatest amount of interest for local government and for the nonprofit sector, are these series of credits related to clean energy generation primarily. So think about building community solar or a solar farm that powers all of the municipal buildings in a community, or converting to geothermal for a campus of a local college or a local community college. And that's done under either the investment tax credit or the production tax credit. So clean energy generation, really big category. The other category where there's a lot of interest, and I think if you look at it on a project by project basis, where we're going to see the greatest amount of early uptake is related to vehicles, right? So if your organization is buying qualified clean vehicles, EVs, right? If your organization or your city or local government is installing charging equipment, there are tax credits available for that, right? And we know, I'll talk about this a little bit later on, we know that a lot of places were doing this before there was an Inflation Reduction Act, and it's a continuation, but Tracy may talk about this in a bit. You may already be eligible, right? I feel like a bad ad on late night TV. You already may be eligible to file for a credit for purchases that you've already made. So remember, am I an applicable entity? Am I doing any of the things that meet the underlying requirements of these tax credits? Third thing to think about are the bonus provisions, right? So the first one is a bonus provision related to the labor being used on a particular project, right? So I work for the Biden-Harris administration. President Biden has said he is the most pro-union president ever. Shouldn't be a surprise, right, that there is a bonus provision related to paying prevailing wage on a project and using participants in a registered apprenticeship program on a project, right? And I'll talk in a moment, it's a significant bonus depending on the size of the project and the type of project that you're doing. So there's a bonus related to labor. There's a bonus related to the materials that are used in that project. Probably heard the president talk about, heard the vice president talk about Buy America, right? So there is a bonus related to domestic content being used. There are also two bonuses related to where the project is going, right? So I will tell you one of the best pieces of news of what we're seeing in terms of private sector investment in clean energy is based on announced projects. Those projects are disproportionately going to counties in the country where the median household income is lower than the national average and the unemployment rate is higher than the national average. So we're making sure that those investments are going to the places that need it the most. These bonus provisions, and they apply under direct pay as well, are part of that. So there is a bonus provision if you locate this project in an energy community. So that is, it could be a place where there used to be a lot of coal mining, or there used to be a coal-fired power plant that helped generate revenue or created employment. But for the purposes of this bonus, if you locate the project on a brownfield site, you may be eligible for this energy community bonus. And then finally, and this is one of the only cases where there is sort of an allocation process, so there's a little bit of competition. There's a bonus related to certain projects being located in low-income communities as well. So what does this all look like, right? Some people, when I used to do work on budget and finance issues, some people would ask me when I'd come up with a bunch of proposals, they'd say, yeah, but is the juice worth the squeeze, right? You know, what are we going to get at the end of the day if we do all this work? Filing tax, we never filed taxes before. So I would argue to you that you get a lot, right? So the easiest example to think about is when you're doing something related to your fleet, right? So if you are purchasing a qualified electric clean vehicle, right? Qualified clean vehicle, let's say you're buying a sedan for a building inspector, right? $7,500 per vehicle. And remember, it's $7,500 per vehicle. If you want to buy one vehicle, it's $7,500. If you want to buy two, it's $15,000. You want to do this to replace your fleet over the 10-year window, you could do that. It's $7,500 per vehicle. If you're buying a heavier vehicle, it's heavier than 14,000 pounds. Let's say school districts are buying electric school buses. I've talked to a couple of cities now buying electric fire engines, right? There, it goes up to $40,000 per vehicle. And you can get up to 30% back on the cost of installing electric charging equipment or other types of alternative fuel propellant. So that's the most straightforward example, right? Think about a project though where you may be, Newark's a really big city. I don't know how you fuel your buildings, how you power your buildings, how you heat them, how you cool them. Well, let's say you did a solar farm that produced a megawatt of electricity here. Say it's a little bit more than a megawatt, and keeping the numbers simple, let's say it costs you $1 million to do that, right? You start at if you're trying to get an investment tax credit, you start at a 6% investment tax credit, which is okay. If you meet that prevailing wage requirement, the prevailing wage and apprentice requirement, the bonus kicks that up to 30%. If you also meet the domestic content bonus requirement, it goes to 40%. If you also meet the energy community requirement, it could go to 50%. That's what the mayor was talking about when he said that that credit could be as much as 50%. On top of that, this is subject to allocation, right? You could get another 10% or 20% if you meet that low-income and community bonus requirement as well. So I would argue to you, and we've heard this, I've heard this from local governments, I've heard this from state governments, this changes the equation, right? I've had budget directors say, there's a big difference between $1 million project that I've got to figure out how to fund all by myself, and $1 million project where I know that at the back end of the process, federal government's going to come to me with a check for half of the cost. So, this is my favorite part because I'm a former budget person. It used to drive me crazy when I was a city finance officer that there would be projects that I knew would generate recurring savings, but I couldn't get them in the capital budget, right? It's just hard. They're sort of less appealing sometimes. It's really hard thing to do when a council and mayor are trying to figure out lots of things. It's hard to lift up these projects, right? That's exactly what these types of investments are, right? We know from our colleagues at the energy department that fleet electrification is going to save you money, right? We know from case studies that have been done, this case involves a college campus, that moving to geothermal, it's not just that capital cost comes down because of the direct pay provision, but the ongoing operating cost is going to come down as well. And it's the reason why cities like San Antonio, lots of cities around the country, are looking at doing solar projects because not only do they think it creates jobs, not only do they think it does what they want to do in terms of moving toward clean energy, it can save money too. Right? So again, it's a lot easier to get these projects funded when the federal government is picking up 30% of the cost or 40% of the cost or 50% of the cost, and there are recurring savings for the city or a nonprofit or another government entity to benefit from. Right? Try and wrap this up pretty quickly. One of the big things that cities around the country have been so successful at over the last couple of years because of the legislation under President Biden and Vice President Harris to between the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and IRA and the American Rescue Plan. We've been really good at taking multiple different resources, right, to figure out how to fully fund a project. And some people talk about it as blending and braiding. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I always worry that I'm going to say brending and blading, but I didn't, right? So here it's blending and braiding. You can blend and braid with grants and with direct pay. So, for example, again, let me keep the numbers simple. Let's say you've got a project for $100,000 and you get a $70,000 grant for that. Well, if that project meets the underlying requirements of one of the tax credits, and you get an investment tax credit of 30%, you get that 30% on the full $100,000. So all of a sudden you go from a $100,000 project that you're trying to figure out how to finance to a project that's got $70,000 in grant money, but you could also file for and get that remaining $30,000 in investment tax credit as well. There's something called the excess benefit rule, so the only thing you can't do is you can't get more than 100% of the cost of the project, which seems fair. So let me tell you where I think we are, and I'm really interested to hear in the Q&A period where folks are here today. This is really very new, right? So the President signed the Inflation Reduction Act in August of 2022. The first projects where applicable entities were able to file for them, those occurred in 2023. The first opportunity to file for them was really in May of this year. For lots of government entities, there's an automatic extension that allows for the first filing to take place in November of this year, and lots of state and local government entities, like I was in law school, if you get the extension, you take it. So we're going to see a lot of filings in November of this year. So we are still at an early stage of this, right? So there are some places that were what I would call pre-adopters. So those were folks that were doing stuff, were buying electric vehicles already, and they're now able pretty quickly to take advantage of these benefits. There are some people who were early adopters, right? They had a climate action plan, they had a sustainability plan, they just weren't quite sure how to finance some of the projects. Now, there's a way to finance them. The vast majority of local governments and nonprofits are kind of in the beginning and planning stage. And again, that's okay. We need people to move forward quickly. That's the whole idea of the incentives. But the benefit of the 10-year runway is this isn't a grant program that, you know, if you don't meet the proposal deadline of next Tuesday, you're out of luck. Cities, local government entities, nonprofits have time to plan, but the idea is to make sure that folks are aware of it now so that they can get moving. There are a bunch of resources that are available. I can't quite see them from here, but they're in the PowerPoint that I think we'll be sharing with everybody. There are lots of pieces of information on the Treasury site, the IRS.gov website, the White House website. You just heard that the state is now getting ready to put together this calculator, which I think is a great idea. So there's a lot of information out there. I want to turn this over to my colleague Teresa Lawrence from the Department of Energy, because one of the things that, in addition to not providing tax advice, the Department of the Treasury doesn't provide technical assistance, but the good news is that the Department of Energy does. So Teresa, let me put it
and that's David's name, and you will be receiving his email when we get the deck sent out. So it's a pleasure to be here today from the Department of Energy and from the Office of Policy, and we are supporting the Department of Treasury as we go around to make sure that everyone knows about this historic opportunity. The laws that were mentioned have been historic for a variety of reasons, but one of which is because this is the first time ever tax exempt entities are able to avail themselves of the tax credits to get the full benefit of the tax credit in the form of a direct cash payment. We really think this is a game changer in the deployment of clean energy resources, and we want to make sure that we share the information so that strategies can be built, and planning is key to make sure we can get all of the benefits of which David spoke about. The benefits not just with lowering the operational costs, getting the full value of the tax credit, and the typical one that we get a lot of the incoming questions on are about the investment tax credit, which is the typical 30% that you get back. This time it's in the form of cash. Before it was only available to commercial tax-paying entities, but now it's available to states, local governments, territories, tribal governments, nonprofits. So it's very exciting. A lot of them result in jobs, and then what's also exciting is the ability to have the pairing, combining it. The Department of Energy, we have a lot of funding opportunities that are currently out on the streets. We've stood up a number of new offices to really make sure what Preeti spoke about with the $330 billion, a lot of it resides with the Department of Energy, and we have a lot of new offices to make sure we get the funds deployed, we get the systems built. Once it's a zero-emitting technology, this will apply. And then the partnerships, that's another key portion of the technical assistance that we provide in helping to inform when you're building your project teams, who needs to be in the room. From the local government, the departments like the Public Works or the General Services, working with the State Energy Office, through which a lot of the funding flows, as well as working through bringing the partners, the unions and the different folks that would have the actual construction entities, to make sure everyone is there, everyone's voices can be heard, so that everyone can be a part of the clean energy transition. And then the technology, the tools, the training. So that's where we just want to highlight a snapshot of the TA opportunities that are flowing through the Department of Energy. And by no means is this an exhaustive list, but certainly we just highlighted a few just to get a feel for some of the opportunities. So starting with clean energy to communities, or C2C. This is an exciting opportunity with 3 different opportunities to participate. We have the in-depth partnerships, which are more along the lines of a 3-year kind of timeline commitment. And the way these work is we bring together the local governments and all of the participating entities with the local electric utility companies and the community-based organizations, nonprofits, and we pair them up with some of the experts from our national labs. So they're already under contract with, under the agreement for the purposes of this program. And we have a lot to choose from because we have 17 national labs with tons of expertise. And this is a very exciting opportunity because it is available on a rolling basis. It doesn't close at a certain time. It's a very easy application form, and this is the 3rd expert match opportunity, where there are 40 to 60 hours of just direct and in-depth engagement to solve a challenge or to plan a project. So this is very useful, and we are wanting to make sure we can get the input of the communities, as David mentioned, with the local government approach, like the communities on the ground mobilizing. We want to make sure that everyone is involved, and for having these types of collaboratives or collaboration opportunities and having the stakeholder engagement, very important. So that C2C is the first T opportunity highlighting here today. And then secondly is EECBG, some of you may have heard about, Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. It was around a decade ago with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. We got another boost of funding through the Inflation Reduction Act. Very flexible funding, a lot of different opportunities in the universe of energy resources and clean energy. And it is available through formula grants as well as competitive. And this provides a lot of technical assistance in the form of blueprints and cohorts. So just making sure that communities know about the opportunities to have peer groups and to have information exchange and best practices, as well as working with getting in cohorts. ECBG has 13 discrete areas in the area of not only efficiency, but also renewables, clean transportation, financing, workforce, building codes, like all of the different areas that you can join and get some of the best practices and how-to guides of building a project and being able to execute it successfully. So this type of TA can really help in the planning phase of the type of project you want to think about when you're going to apply on the back end for direct pay, to make sure you can get that funding stream coming in very soon after the project is built and is operational. And we have some links that will be sent out as well. And then also leaning in on the Legacy State Energy Program. This has been around for a while, also got a boost of funding, and it has a lot of focus on training and technical assistance to make sure that when states are planning this, funding, it flows through the State Energy Office typically, just to make sure that all of the energy that provided can be clean and affordable. We know like states may have 2050 goals for net zero or a certain timeline by which they want to start to decarbonize the grid. So all of this helps with the holistic planning, and this pairs very nicely with the opportunity for direct pay and elective pay. So there are project officers that are located all around the nation that can be utilized to make sure that we have all of the information. And then for the technologically savvy ones around, who we really like apps, we like maps, we like portals, we like databases, and different tools and neat resources. DOE has this nice gateway, the State and Local Solution Center, that can really help to provide like really nimble types of data where everything can be up to date. This is a resource hub, and it is just a very neat. Once you go to the website, you'll see all of like the slope tool, all of these different forms of data sources that can be accessed. So that's another great opportunity to pair with the technical assistance opportunities. And lastly, we recently launched a funding opportunity coming through the Office of Policy called Elective Pay Blueprints for Communities. And this really will result in model plans and just really good best practices for being able to know how to navigate the whole realm of elective pay. There will be resource guides and documents, templates, also very helpful. This is on a very quick turn. It's only out on the street for a month, and we're looking for organizations familiar with providing technical assistance and educational guidance to help with building communities and increasing and improving resilience, to be able to apply for this so that we can have mass distribution of the resources that come out of this opportunity. So once this opportunity closes within the next week or so, we will be able to get to work in earnest and have these resources out on the street as we continue with the planning in short order. So we're very excited about this, and we look forward to being able to provide best practices on just the financing, the getting all of your documents ready, determining the tax year, other things like what resources to lean on for the prevailing wage and apprenticeship opportunities, because there are rules surrounding like making sure you can have that fivefold increase that David spoke about in the base to get up to that 30% cashback. So we're really looking forward to being able to continue the conversation And so that's just a snapshot. We're here when our information goes out. Feel free to reach out to us at DOE. We have other folks, back at the office. We often schedule one-on-ones with different entities or different local governments with some of the more in-depth questions that would be applicable on on a particular basis. So with that, I'll hand off to Sustainable Jersey.
Hello, I just want to thank the City of Newark and the Department of Energy and all the other entities for inviting Sustainable Jersey to tag along today. It's been fun. We've been to a couple different cities. And I just wanted to share, my name's Tracy Woods. I'm from Sustainable Jersey, which is a statewide nonprofit that serves municipalities and school districts. And we help them do sustainability projects. One of our key offerings, which the City of Newark has taken advantage of, is a technical assistance program where we support municipalities and school districts in completing sustainability projects that have to do with energy. We also just recently worked with the City of Newark to help with their community energy plan. And I want to acknowledge Nicole from the Office of Sustainability over here, who is a great partner in that project. Currently, the City of Newark is certified at the bronze level at the Sustainable Jersey program, which is a very difficult program, and it's a distinct feat that they have managed it. So we're really pleased to be here today. And I wanted to talk about how the technical assistance program at Sustainable Jersey really aligns with all these other programs and opportunities that you've been hearing about today, because one of the things that we do is we help municipalities and school districts look for funding opportunities, like David was saying, to braid into these programs, funding the overall projects. So we help municipalities and school districts identify funding through the federal government, the state utilities, that can be put onto the incentives that come through the direct pay program to create the total funding package for programs. And so we're really, that's something that we are funded through the Board of Public Utilities to help with for municipalities and school districts this year, and we're very pleased to be part of that program. Just a couple things I want to, that were mentioned earlier that I want to reiterate is one piece of really good news. As David said, many of us are just finding out about this and may have felt like, oh, we missed an opportunity for a recently completed program. Municipalities and school districts that haven't previously filed with the IRS have an automatic extension to November 15th. So if you have completed projects, for projects completed in the year 2023. And so if you've completed projects in the year 2023, you can still, it's not too late to get the incentives for the, the tax credit, I should say, for that year. And that's something that it takes a little while to do that. So you want to get started pretty quickly, getting registered with the program and everything. And so that's something that we can support as well, in addition to the technical assistance offering from the Department of Energy. I also wanted to reiterate that the fact that we're looking at tax incentives for these programs, in order to receive the full benefit of the direct pay program, the entity, either the school district or the other tax exempt entity that is applying for the program, has to be the owner of the project. Which means that we need to think, like traditionally, the rule of thumb for solar and other renewable energy projects in the public local government space has been to work with a third party to as the financer of the project. Like in solar, it would be a power purchase agreement. So when we're thinking about how projects will be constructed, to take advantage of the direct pay program, we'll have to think about it a little bit differently. And in this year, Sustainable Jersey will be creating guidance to support the procurement of projects in a way that's beneficial to receiving the direct pay incentive. So we look forward to helping local governments in New Jersey out with that as well. And So just one thing to add is that there's a flyer that's right over there, and we have a direct pay list that we're creating so that when there's news from Sustainable Jersey around direct pay, you can be on the mailing list for that news and find out about different resources and guidance that's available as the term goes on. Thank you so much.
Great. As Tracy mentioned, we have a handout right on that blue table over there. It has all the information that you may need, especially contact information, so that we can help you navigate whether you qualify and can claim your direct pay credit. So very exciting. Thanks so much to all the presenters. I'm going to open it up to questions. Does anyone have questions? Yes.
Hi, Vivian Berkeley. My question is about projects that have already have been completed. How far back can it go?
David, do you want to take that one?
Sure.
Is the start date or the end date or that sort of thing?
So if it's a project that went into service after January of 2023, it may be eligible, right? It goes to a question about what your tax year is, but it's worth, if you've gotten any projects that actually went into service or where you purchased them and then they went into service after January 1, 2023, it's worth looking at the details of the tax provisions to see if you can still get a credit on that. But if it's anything that, you built in 2021 and it started generating power in 2022, unfortunately that isn't covered.
Another question, just around the grant, you mentioned that grading the funding and you can already have a grant. Can federal funds be part of that, or is it any part?
Yeah. Yes. So the answer is yes. And to be clear, on all of this, right? So in addition to this isn't tax guidance, the answer on all of this is you should look closely at all the provisions, and because of the dollars involved, people are bringing on tax professionals to help them look at all of this, right? But the answer is generally speaking yes. If it's federal grant, it works. There's nothing in the tax code that precludes it. Individual granting departments or agencies may have their own rules about how their grants are used, so you need to consult with them as well. But the tax code provisions were designed so that you could blend and break. Twice. Yeah.
This is, I guess, related to the blending and breaking issue. The city of Newark, Office of Sustainability, led by Nicole, is working on a EPA community change grant, working with a number of nonprofit groups, Ironbound, or the community of Acasa. It sounds like some of the eligible activities for that might be related to this. Is that, am I right?
Yeah, again, you should consult with the EPA in terms of the use of the grant, but I believe that actually the community change grant in particular was designed to make sure that you can do it in concert with direct pay. I think that's true for solar. I know a number of different local governments have solar for all grants. Same thing there. Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. This is fantastic. Really appreciate folks coming here to Newark and really explaining this to us in such great detail. And I think it's very exciting to hear about all the technical assistance resources that are available to cities and nonprofits that want to do this. My question is around, so I think even with all of the blendable and gradable resources through the IRA, right, there is still sort of this gap that we know that a lot of cities and organizations are going to have in getting access to the upfront capital to be able to do, particularly like the big transformative projects, right, like fleet conversion or geothermal. So is there any kind of coordination happening at the federal level where, like, folks are talking to, for example, the greenhouse gas reduction funding grantees or the loan program office to really make sure that cities can get access to that affordable capital?
Yeah, I think there are a bunch of different, right? So there are a couple of questions in there, right? There's a question about, great, you're going to give me 30%, where do I get the other 70%, right? That's one thing. The other question that's in there is, great, you're gonna give me 30%, but I don't get it until after I've built everything, put it into service, waited until I could file for the tax year, and then I have to wait for the check to come back. So on the last point, I'll give you a bit of good news, right? So when we issued the final rules on direct pay, when Treasury and IRS issued the final rules, one of the questions that those of us doing this sort of engagement were pushing is, well, when do they get a check? Because from a bridge financing perspective, right, there's a big difference between 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, and 2 years. So if you look at the FAQs around direct pay, IRS came forward with an answer that said, look, we're not going to treat this any differently than we would treat any other tax credit payment. Assuming everything is in order, we would expect it's within 45 days at the end of the filing period for the tax year that's being filed. So that helps a little bit, right? But yes, GGRF is definitely something that a lot of people are looking toward, both on the how do you close the gap and on the sort of bridge finance, whether you do bridge financing, right? Some cities, I will tell you, and every city is kind of doing its own thing here, sort of say, look, we feel good enough about this so that we figured that there's a way to basically create a reserve and use it as kind of an internal revolving fund, right? So the best example of this is the city of Denver, which is the ultimate pre-adopter, right? So they passed a sales tax referendum in 2020 to fund clean energy projects. And what they've now sort of said is, oh, great, now we'll just circulate we'll use that as our upfront money and circulate it. I could go on ad nauseum about how cool I think what they've done as a budgeting mechanism is, right? But that's kind of the idea there. Then there's, there are some places that are pursuing commercial loan activity. There is the ability to use direct pay in conjunction with the issuance of municipal debt or other types of debt. There's a haircut provision if you do that, though, so you need to be careful about that from a planning perspective. And I think lots of different people, including some state governments around the country, are trying to figure out whether there's a potential green bank angle here, whether there's some other sort of revolving fund angle. So it is absolutely an issue, and I think a lot of people are focused on. I think one of the great things about what energy is doing with these blueprints is, I think one of the things that winds up getting explored in that is, what are the various different mechanisms? The one thing I'll say about GGRF, right, which is fantastic as a source for this, is my understanding is everybody's kind of in the negotiation stage right now about finalizing the agreements. So it doesn't provide, I don't know that there's anything that provides an instant answer, at least not that I'm aware of.
I have one question.
Yeah.
My question's around you had the labor with the prevailing wage and apprentice. Now, do you have to have both of those in the same thing? Can I have an apprentice without having a prevailing wage?
So I would urge you, right, so there's going to be additional guidance on this coming out, right? But there's some preliminary guidance on it already. I can't remember what the percentage. I think it is both. I don't know if it's the exact, I don't know if it's the exact same thing in terms of prevailing wage rates as Davis-Bacon would be, but conceptually it's the same thing. And I think I want to say, please do not hold me to this, right? And this is definitely not tax advice. I think it's like 15% of the project has to come through a registered apprenticeship program. But then there are all sorts of provisions about, well, what if we try in a particular trade, but we can't get it? So I would urge you to read the guidance that's down there. I also want to say, because somebody just told me this, there may also be something related to project labor agreements, for example, that allow you to deal with, that create sort of a safe harbor in terms of dealing with the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirement. It's not required, but it's a means of doing it.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah,
One-
Jake.
one- One resource I'd recommend everyone go to is irs.gov/elective pay, and that'll detail out some of the guidance that the IRS has already issued. What I always tell my friends who don't work in politics or government is, if you remember Schoolhouse Rock for how a bill becomes a law, they need to make a second song for how laws become guidance.
Right.
And that is what our teams have been working on. And so what the administration's been trying to do before the end of the year, so we have quite a deadline coming up, is that we want to get as much guidance out to make sure that businesses and nonprofits and local governments have enough information so they can know what decisions they need to make. And then we take in feedback, we have a notice of public comment, and then we can finalize that guidance. And so for prevailing wage, what we'd recommend is you open up that website, you go to the guidance, and you sit down with your tax attorney, who is obviously not David, as helpful as he's been, but you sit down with your own municipalities or organizations' tax attorneys, and then you go through that. And if you have any questions based on that interpretation, you can come to us, you can come to your technical assistance teams.
I think that link is one of the magic secret links that wasn't showing on the page. So there, just so you all know, there are like 60 different pieces of guidance that have been issued since August of 2022. I think the last time I looked, it was 1,800 pages. Here's the good news. So first of all, I actually had a tax accountant come up to me this morning in Passaic to tell me how easy this was, and how clear both the code was. Not sure if I agree with that, but how easy the code was. But what I do agree with is the FAQs and the guidance that Joe was talking about are really quite clear, and I think really helpful. The other thing that I can do for you is I can't give you tax advice, but if you raise a specific question for me, very often I know where it is, right? So I could save you some time in going through the 1,800 pages of guidance and the FAQs. The question may not totally answer every aspect of it, and again, to Jay's point, that's why there are tax attorneys and tax professionals that get involved with this sort of thing. But that is the one area. If we've already given advice or given guidance or opined on it, I could point you in that direction.